Hello everybody, welcome to this new episode of This Week in Tech. This is a format where I try to explain all the most important news in tech that happened in the previous 7 days. And the reasons why I do this is because tech evolves super fast. But some of the things that are happening today in tech may shape your career. It may shape our society. It may shape our world. So it's super important that we keep track of all these things. But how do you do that when there's so much stuff happening? Well, it's my job to keep track of these things. So I spend all this time reading, and then I spend time summarizing all these things for you to understand. If you follow this format for a while, you know that this is kind of a weird setup. I usually am somewhere else. I usually am in Copenhagen, but today I'm in Rome. I spent 2 days at the beginning of this week teaching to a business school in the north of Italy. I taught these students AI, how to use artificial intelligence in their business. It was lots of fun, always interesting to talk about AI to young people. But now I'm in Rome with my family, and you may see my family dog Martin in the end of the video, so make sure you watch the whole thing. This week we're gonna focus on one important news, that is Meta losing 230 billions in market share. This is really important, I think, because it's gonna tell us a lot about what's happening to Facebook. And since Facebook is so important in our society, I mean, it has like 3 billion users, we need to understand what is happening to them and how it can potentially impact digital marketing in general, we may say. Then we're gonna talk about Amazon having some pretty interesting news. And third, we're gonna talk about 2 hackers who stole more than $4 billion worth of Bitcoin. And finally, they got caught by the Department of Justice, who managed to get back almost all of this money. We're gonna see how, and we're gonna see what this means for the future of crypto. Last week, Meta, the company previously known as Facebook, released their quarterly results. And they were bad, like really bad. So the company ended up losing 26% of its market share in one day, which accounts for roughly $230 billion. This was the single biggest one-day drop in the history of the stock market. Now, Meta, so Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and all the VR stuff, it's a super important company because it's not only huge and a lot of people use it, but also a lot of smaller businesses are entirely built on Facebook. So it's important to understand what is happening. Now, I think that the reasons for this huge drop are mostly 5. The first one is users. For the first time in history, Facebook lost users this quarter. They lost just 500,000 users, and considering they have 2.9 billion, it's not that much. And if you consider Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, they added actually a little bit of users, but Facebook, that blew up, for the first time, lost some, which is crazy because the promise of Facebook has always been, we're gonna grow. We're going to keep growing. That's why investors put a bunch of money in the company, and that's why it was worth almost $1 trillion. But right now, the users seem to be leaving the app. One interesting data point here is that if you think about it, 2.9 billion users, it's almost the entire world, considering that the app cannot be used in China for regulations. So Facebook had already been working on trying to bring internet to developing countries to basically bring more people online so that they could have Facebook. So it's obviously they were gonna reach a plateau. That was definitely going to happen at some point. That's, I guess, normal. You can't have infinite growth. But Wall Street does not like things that stop growing and actually started declining. And so that's one of the reasons why the stock market went down, but also because that's a signal for how the competition that they're having right now from TikTok is starting to affect them. And so that's the second reason for this huge drop. TikTok's competition. For the first time, maybe in the history of the company, there's one competitor that seemed to be very effective at taking users from them. Think about this. Facebook's business is basically to get your attention, to have you spend your time with your eyeballs on the app, and then put some ads here and there. Now, there's just so much time that you can spend during a day with your eyes on an app. Which means that if TikTok is being very successful, well, some of your attention must go from the Facebook family of apps towards TikTok, and that's a big issue. Now, the strategy of Meta to fight TikTok's competition was to bet a lot on Instagram Reels. But two things. One, they don't work as good as TikTok yet. Number two, they're hard to monetize. It's much harder for Instagram to put an ad between two reels than in your user feed or between stories. They just convert worse, which is kind of like a paradox. Reels seem to be the way for Facebook to find TikTok competition, but by betting on Reels, they're making their ads less effective, which means that they are basically losing money. That's a huge issue, and Mark Zuckerberg addressed this in the earnings call and said, hey, we had problems already with Snapchat and we came up with stories. Instagram stories in the beginning were not working that well, but now they're a key part of the user experience. We're gonna do the same thing with Reels. They're not working today, maybe. They're gonna work in the future, trust us. Now, if you trust Zach, good, you keep your money in Facebook. If you don't trust him, you put your money out, and that's what a lot of people did. Now, third reason why this stock lost so much money, and that's Apple. Apple with iOS 14 introduced app tracking transparency. So it's worth explaining this a little bit because it's very important. If you want to know more about this, I had a 1.5 hour long deep dive on Facebook a few months ago. You can watch it for free by subscribing to my community during your 14-day trial period. But let me just make a quick summary because this is how Facebook works. It's super important. So hear me out. What app tracking transparency does is it asks the user if he wants to allow an app to track what you do outside of that app. That was something that was basically the key to Facebook's success. Because, when you see an ad on Facebook, let's say you see a pair of shoes, you click on the ad and you end up on a browser. Then you may buy the shoes, and Facebook needed to have that piece of data. It needed to know that you bought these shoes on a browser so that this piece of information could be circled back to Facebook. They will have closed the loop. Facebook will have known that that ad led to a conversion, which made their machine learning models understand what kind of people were most likely to buy that product and had better ads, better targeting, and more money being spent on advertising, obviously. Now, Apple basically broke this circle. They said, hey, if you show an ad to somebody and this person did not give you consent to being tracked outside, when they go on another app, we're not going to let you know what this person did. And so Facebook was basically blind. Their ads started to be less effective and people started to put less money on Facebook ads. Meta's CFO said that the Apple's new privacy regulation led the company to lose roughly $10 billion in 2022. So it's still an estimation, but it gives you an idea about how hard Meta was impacted by this. And now this brings me to talk about the fourth reason why this company is in a bad situation right now. This is actually something that I talked about already in the deep dive. That was before the company switched their name to Meta. It was kind of a prediction that I did, and I'm pretty proud of it. So I think you should really watch that deep dive. Facebook is the only company in the big tech world that is entirely reliant on somebody else to exist. Let me explain. Facebook makes most of its money, like 95%, from ads on mobile, but they don't own any operative system. They don't make smartphones, which means that they need the permission, basically, of Tim Cook or of Sundar Pichai on Android in order to do what they need to do to be a business. So that's a huge threat because they don't own any platform. And when you don't own a platform, the kind of stuff that I talked about before happens. So people may actually really damage your business and you can't do anything about it. So the solution for Facebook to this problem is to invest in their own platform, which is the metaverse. And that's reason number 4 why they lost all this money. For the first time, Facebook broke down the numbers of the Reality Labs department. They made $2 billion in revenues last year, but they spent 12, which means that they're throwing out of the window $10 billion per year on their metaverse development. Now, if you're a believer in the metaverse, you don't care about this because you're in for the long-term returns. But if you're a skeptic, and I guess in Wall Street there are a lot of skeptics, When you hear a company spending 10 billion a year and wanting to double that number this year, you pull your money back and you leave the stock to go down. So we're going to have to see how this thing evolves. And fifth and last reason, regulation. A lot of regulators are kind of pissed at Facebook. The US government is pissed at Facebook. The EU government is pissed at Facebook. Everybody's pissed at Facebook. So that's obviously a liability. But there's something interesting here. The stock value of Facebook went below $600 billion now that they lost a lot of money. And that's the threshold for the US regulators to apply some very tough antitrust regulations. Which means that paradoxically, this loss of market cap could actually help Facebook get out of some of these regulatory pressures. So it's going to be super interesting in the next few months to see what Mark Zuckerberg is going to pull off of his hat. And that's going to decide whether in 10 years from now, Facebook is going to be still one of the biggest tech companies that exist, or is going to end up in the tech graveyard. So I think you should keep following and sharing these videos so that you stay up to date on the development of this crazy story. While Facebook is in trouble, Amazon is doing great. Last week, they also announced their earnings report and they said that they doubled their employees since the beginning of the pandemic. Now they have 1.6 million employees, which means that 1 out of 153 Americans works for Amazon. This is mind-boggling. But what's also completely insane is that for the first time, they broke down the numbers of their advertising business. You know, when you look for a product on Amazon and on the first spots you have ads, these kind of ads are bringing a lot of cash to Amazon. Specifically, last year they made $31 billion in ads. That's a bigger business than YouTube. Amazon also opened up to the entire United States Amazon Care, a new telehealth service which allows people to get healthcare service from home, but also get nurses come to their houses to help them out with different tasks, from blood draws to listening to their lungs. It's going really well. They've been using it just for a few limited cities so far. They have an average satisfaction rate of 4.7 out of 5. So this is gonna grow a lot, I'm sure about it. And if you think about it, last week we talked about Amazon opening a new physical store for fashion. When are they gonna stop? Really, Jeff Bezos is really hungry and it doesn't look like he's ever gonna stop trying to take over different industries. The only threat that I am seeing right now with Amazon is that their success is built for a big part on the shoulders of their workers that are often underpaid and treated really not great. And Amazon has been trying to prevent them from unionizing, but I think at some point they're just going to have to give up. And since it's a business that tries to squeeze in a lot of profit margin by not paying people, basically, that's likely going to change in the future, I hope at least. But as you see, with all these new businesses starting up, they have, by the way, higher margins, like advertising has a crazy margin, or healthcare can have a crazy margin. I suspect that when they're going to have to increase the salary of the workers, because at some point they're going to have to do it, then, well, they're going to have all the lines of business that are basically going to pay for the lower margins with their, traditional e-commerce stuff. What a crazy company. The Bonnie and Clyde of crypto have been caught. In 2016, the crypto exchange Bitfinex was hacked and more than 119,000 bitcoins were stolen. Today, these bitcoins are worth $4.5 billion. Now, the two thieves named Ilya Lichtenstein and Heather Morgan have finally been caught by the Department of Justice, who managed to get back $3.6 billion worth of Bitcoin, almost 100,000 Bitcoins. And they're going to try to give them back to the people that had this money originally and they had them on the crypto exchange Bitfinex, which I think is going to be hard. But I think it's also cool that maybe they're going to get this money back. There's a few interesting things about this. First of all, these guys were crazy. They were rapping about crypto on TikTok. Some of their content is super cringe, but they were not rich. They couldn't have a very luxurious lifestyle, even though they had access to more than $4 billion worth of crypto. Let's try to understand why. Well, first of all, it's very hard to do money laundering with crypto because it's on a public ledger Everybody can see the movements of this money, and so it's kind of hard to siphon them away from the system and just get them back. What they were trying to do in order to clean this money in the beginning was to use an exchange that then was shut down that basically guaranteed anonymity. Then they tried to move this money to smaller accounts and try to exchange this Bitcoin for more privacy-preserving coins like Monero. They even tried to buy gold or Walmart gift cards. They tried to do a lot of things and they managed to actually use some of this money, but not a lot. But let's talk about how they got found. Well, in some of these cases, to clean some of this money, they had to go to real financial institutions and say stuff like, hey, I have a bunch of Bitcoin because I'm a Silicon Valley investor and I bought these Bitcoins back in 2013 or something. I would like to deposit them and get some cash in return. And to do these things, they had to give their identity. Then the authorities were able to match their identity to the wallets with the stolen Bitcoin and found out their names. Once they did that, they found out that they had saved the public and private keys of their wallets on basically a Google Drive folder or something like this. We don't know if it's Google or Dropbox, but let's just say that it's Google. They went to Google and said, hey, I have a warrant. I need to get the data that these guys have. Google said, oh, yeah, I guess we have to give you the data. They got the data back and they just moved all the funds back into safe hands, which I think is really interesting because you may think, oh my God, these guys are so dumb. Like, why do you save your private keys on a Google Drive folder? But come on, if you have 2,000 wallets because you had to move all this cash around to smaller accounts, how the hell are you going to remember all these private keys? You could potentially, save them on a piece of paper. What if you lose it? You could engrave them on a piece of gold and put them under the ground. But yeah, just like this doesn't seem very easy. So I think a lot of people end up saving their private keys maybe on an encrypted file on Google Drive or something like this, which is kind of funny because we talk a lot about decentralization of crypto, but in this case, the keys to access the service were in the hands of a private company that was a cloud provider, which it's not that different from having the keys to access your fiat money in the hands of a private company like a bank. There's also something else that is super interesting, I think, which is that the US government had to make a lot of work to try to get this money back and then give them back to the people, which it's, I guess, a good thing of having a government that helps you in case somebody steals money from you. So there's a lot of back and forth between the crypto enthusiasts and the crypto skeptics. You may have understood that I'm a little bit of a crypto skeptic, by the way. But that's something that we need to say here. All the nice and good decentralization of crypto comes with problems. Centralization comes with problems as well, but it comes also with nice features like I have a government to complain to if somebody steals money from me. So this is one of these cases where some of the features of centralization help to solve some of the bugs of decentralization. So now the cabal is going to have to face 20 years in prison, not for stealing money though, for money laundering, which I think is interesting. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Every week I push one video where I explain you in easy and simple words all the most important things that happened in tech. So I recommend you like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends because tech is impacting all of us. The news of next week may have a crazy impact on your career, so you have to stay updated, and I want to help you with that. Before I leave you, I want to tell you that I started my new community programs. In these community programs, you're going to get access not just to these videos, as well as all the research links that I had to read to know about this news, but you're also gonna get access to bi-weekly deep dives. These are 1.5 hour sessions that I do on Zoom where people can come in, listen to me speaking for 45 minutes about the most important topics in tech. I usually take just one, really dissect into the most important things and explain it well for 45 minutes. And then we participate in a conversation when together we try to understand how this new technology or this new trend is going to impact society. I'm going to leave the link so that you can check out more information and join it if you want. That being said, I wish you a great rest of the day. I'll see you soon. Ciao.